This week's case is a supernatural mystery story about a little girl who could see and talk to spirits. So, let's get started. Hello everyone, my name is Brandy and it is time for a true crime case or mystery this week with one or more of my fabulous felines. Now, Darth Kittius is right here, right off camera, sleeping in one of the beds. I don't know if she'll get up. She's pretty out of it right now. She's been playing all day. But her birthday's coming up next month, and she'll be a whole 1 year old. And it's just nice to see her go from a very sickly, ill cat to a very healthy chonk of a cat who now likes to rule the house. So if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back, my feline friends, and a big shout out to my feline fans who help support this channel. Also, just a quick merch update. All shirts in the merch shop right now are only $14. This is the cheapest I've ever seen them. So if you are waiting for a sale, go to my merch shop. Link is in the description and pick yourself up a shirt. Maybe one that has the lovely little Darth Kittius on it. So while we're filming here, I'll actually film Darth Kittius on my phone and I will throw it into the video so you can see just how adorable she is. She has not grown very much. She still looks like a kitten. I don't think she'll get any bigger, but yes, as you can see, she has definitely made herself at home and she runs this house. I think she will become the alpha cat. Are you gonna say hi to everybody? Little girl, hi. Oh, you're so pretty. Okay, I won't bother you. You can sleep. So everybody always asks about Darth Kittius, so I want to make sure that I always update everybody. Okay, so let's get into this week's case. I know I've said in the past that we've covered some stories that were kind of semi-supernatural, so I figured I would get into a full-blown supernatural story today that counts as a mystery because some people don't believe what happened and some people do. So let's talk about it and get your opinion. So the Wyrick family had bought their first house and they moved into Ellerslie, Georgia in 1989. Now, the house was just kind of a modest one-story. It was really nothing fancy, but it fit what the family needed and it was in their budget, which was great. The house had 3 bedrooms, so they could expand their family in the future. So the Wyrick family was a married couple named Lisa and Andrew, and they had a 3-year-old daughter named Heidi. Now, the previous owners of this house, apparently why it was so cheap, is the owners just upped and moved and left the place abandoned. So we'll find out why. So after the family moved in and got themselves settled, they tended to notice that Heidi spent a lot of time on her own. I mean, she didn't have any siblings and there wasn't a lot of kids around the neighborhood to play with because after all, she was only 3 years old. And they kind of figured out that she had an imaginary friend. Now, at first, Andrew and Lisa, this is completely normal to have an imaginary friend, especially when you're an only child and you have no siblings. However, after a while, Lisa would, kind of catch her daughter having these full-blown one-sided conversations. She said this wasn't like a child talking to their imaginary friend. It was like a child talking to somebody real, like how, she would talk to an adult. And the conversations could go on for like an hour, which usually a 3-year-old does not have that type of attention span. Now, Heidi started spending a lot of time in her room, alone with her friend. And, Lisa just didn't want her to start isolating this early in life. So Lisa decided to ask Heidi about her friend. Now, Heidi went on to explain that her friend was not another child, like usually imaginary friends are. That her friend was actually an older man with gray hair who wore a black suit, a top hat, and he wore shiny shoes. and his name was Mr. Gordy. Heidi would go on to explain that Mr. Gordy and her would have conversations about everything, about nothing in her room, and they would just talk and play, and that when he would take her outside, he would push her on the swings. Now, Lisa would watch her daughter, and when Heidi walked outside to walk to her swing, Heidi would have her hand up in the air, and Lisa said it did appear like she was holding an adult's hand, but nobody was beside her. Now, Lisa would watch Heidi very closely during all this and just kind of chalk it up to the fact that maybe this Mr. Gordy is Heidi's way of coping with the move that they had just done. Now, not too soon after the Wyrick family moved into their house, the house next door came up for sale, and Lisa reached out to her sister Joyce and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you lived next door? And then that's exactly what happened. Joyce, her sister, moved in next door. One day, Heidi was playing in the living room while Lisa was just doing household chores. Now, Heidi would end up running to her mom, and she stated that she heard a knock on the door, and she answered the door, which, Lisa was kind of like, you're not supposed to answer the door. And Lisa didn't recall hearing a knock, but regardless, Heidi had answered the door, and she said that there was a man standing there. And Lisa was kind of like, oh, was it Mr. Gordy? And she's like, no, this wasn't Mr. Gordy. This was a different man. And he had his hand in a cast, or like a bandaged up, and he had blood all over his shirt. Well, Lisa became concerned, and she kind of ran to the front door and looked around and didn't find anybody or see anybody, especially somebody with blood on their shirt. But she still was kind of freaked out. So she ended up calling her husband, Andrew. And when Andrew got home, he looked around the property and he never found anyone either, nor did they find any evidence that if somebody had blood on the shirt, maybe they were bleeding, but there was no blood on the porch or the door or anything like that. So once again, they kind of just chalked it up to Heidi's imagination. Now, Lisa would end up telling her sister Joyce about all of this, about Mr. Gordy, about this bloody man that came to the door, apparently, and just overall concern that her daughter was isolating herself. Now, Joyce, being a curious woman, began just looking into the history of both their houses and in the area in general. Now, Joyce talked to the previous owners of her own house, and her name was Catherine. Joyce and Catherine began talking and kind of learned about the area a little bit. Well, then, ironically, Catherine had some old paperwork from kind of the previous owners that she wanted Joyce to have, just to be on record for stuff. And as Joyce was looking through the paperwork, she happened to notice that on one of the old deed or some sort of old paperwork about the land, that there was a signature at the bottom of the paperwork, and the signature was from a man named James Gordy. So Joyce ended up asking Catherine, wait a minute, do you know who this James Gordy is? And Catherine stated, yes, that she knew who James Gordy was, that James Gordy actually was kind of the caretaker of the land of the house when her mother lived in the house. And, that he just kind of took care of things and helped her mom out, and that he was a very nice guy. She asked Catherine, and she said, well, where's James living now? Is he still living here? And Catherine replied, no, unfortunately, James Gordy passed away in 1974, 10 years before Heidi was born. So Joyce took this information to Lisa and kind of filled her in on everything, and maybe asked Lisa, could this be the Mr. Gordy that Heidi is talking about? So the two women decided to talk to Heidi about it. So they sat Heidi down and kind of, talked to her, trying to get some information out of Heidi. But, getting information out of 3-year-olds kind of difficult sometimes. So the two women thought, okay, we're just going to tell Heidi that, there was a man named Mr. Gordy that had passed away way before she was born. So they did tell Heidi that. Heidi did seem to understand, and then suddenly she said, well, I would like to see Mr. Gordy's grave. So the two women obliged, and they found out that James Gordy was buried in a local cemetery in the area and took her to the cemetery. When they got out of the car, Heidi seemed to know exactly where she was going and went exactly to James Gordy's grave, even though she couldn't read. So, of course, after this, Joyce's curiosity, as well as Lisa's, began to go into overdrive, right? So they contact again Catherine, the previous owner of Joyce's house, and they get in touch with the realtor to try to get some history on the house the Wyrics were living in as well. So Catherine got in touch with some people in the area, and she was able to get a hold of, some old pictures. So the photographs were kind of laid out on the table, and everybody's just looking through them, and Catherine's doing her best to kind of go through the history as much as she can. Heidi comes up and is looking through them, and then suddenly Heidi picks up one of the pictures, and she pointed out to one of the men in the pictures, and she said, "This was the bloody man at the door, and his name was Con, C-O-N." Lisa explained to Catherine what was going on in the house at that point, and Catherine kind of became a little bit unnerved. Catherine then looked at the picture that Heidi was holding, and she said, "That man is actually named Lon, L-O-N, but his full name was Lon Con Bachelor." And she said, "That is my uncle." Catherine explained that when Lon was younger, he had an accident in a cotton gin and really messed his hand up. Now, he didn't die from that. He actually died of cancer in 1957. So after this, Andrew, Lisa, and Joyce were a bit freaked out. I mean, wouldn't you be? They just seemed to prove that not only was there a real Mr. Gordy in the neighborhood, but now there's a real Lon in the neighborhood that fit the description, and Heidi was able to pick him out of a picture. So Lisa and Andrew talked it over, and they thought maybe a distraction is what was needed for Heidi. And so what they decided to do was, let's go get a dog. Heidi loves animals, and maybe this dog will be enough to distract her, and that will be her new best friend. So the family goes out and they adopt a dog, and of course Heidi falls in love with this dog, and it does become her best friend. But the dog would start staring into the corners of the house, into hallways at seemingly nothing, and would growl and bark. This happened a lot, and Lisa and Andrew became more uncomfortable than they already were. Now, unfortunately, one day the dog kind of freaked out, and so Lisa let him outside. He ran off and unfortunately was never found. Now, even through this, Heidi never stopped seeing Mr. Gordy, and she also stated that other friends were coming to visit her now as well. There were quite a few that Heidi would talk about, but it wasn't just, human friends. It was animals too. She was seeing humans and animals that Lisa and Andrew could not see. Now, some time went on, and Lisa and Andrew, they then start experiencing some strange occurrences now. They've been in the house now for about a year, and they're starting to notice some weird stuff. They'd hear objects move when nobody was in the room. The doors would open and close by themselves. And at night, Lisa stated that if she was very quiet and right about to fall asleep, she could hear whispering that seemed to happen right above her bed, and she swore that she would hear her name in this whispering. Now, one day, there was a real little girl that was over at the Wyric's house playing with Heidi. Now, Lisa was watching these two little girls play in the living room, just being little girls, when suddenly the chair from the kitchen table, got pulled out, somebody pulled it out, but there was nobody in there. Then suddenly the chair just flipped over, somebody just threw it. That really freaked Lisa out. So Lisa decided to go get some advice from her pastor. Now, her pastor would end up telling her ghosts or spirits really did not exist, but demons did, and so she would have to be very careful. Now, Lisa and Andrew were scared, but they didn't want to move. I mean, they had, bought this house. This was a very sentimental house for them because it was their first house. They lived right next door to their sister. So they just didn't want to move. And they figured, well, nobody's really getting hurt, so let's just ride this out and see where it goes. So a couple years go by, and Lisa now finds herself pregnant with her second child. Around this time, though, Heidi began telling her parents that there was something new in the house, and it wasn't good. It was bad, like a bad figure. Heidi would refer to this bad figure as a dark shadow where she couldn't make out any facial features or anything, and it would just appear in the corner of her bedroom. Heidi said that when the figure would appear, her room would get cold, she would get cold, and that one time it even pulled her hair. One night in the middle of the night, Heidi woke up and she was crying. So her parents came to check on her, and she actually had 3 deep cuts on her face. Now, her parents, kind of cleaned them up and got everything done, put her back to bed, and just kind of figured that somehow she did that to herself in her sleep. However, the next morning, Andrew woke up and he stated that he had scratches on his side and his face. And when Heidi got up later that morning, she told her dad that, well, the bad figure did it to her and the bad figure did it to him as well. So that became a concern because now it seems like people were getting hurt. Now, by 1994, Lisa had given birth to another daughter named Jordan. The family decided to go see a parapsychologist. Now, the parapsychologist is someone who studies the psychic phenomena that is like inexplicable by, it can't be explained by standard scientific methods, right? So they find this doctor and they tell this doctor about Mr. Gordy, the bloody figure, the dark figure, things going on in the house, things that have happened, years before when they first moved in. And the doctor checked around and he was able to get pictures of James Gordy from James Gordy's daughter who still lived in the area. Now, he put the pictures out on a table to test Heidi. Heidi immediately went to James Gordy picture, pulled it out, and said, "This is Mr. Gordy." The doctor does a variety of tests in the home, and he just begins working with the family pretty regularly to try and figure out how they can, make all these things normal, make these things go away, right? Now, because over the years, Heidi had told her friends, she'd talk about things at school, the community kind of knew what was going on, or at least heard the rumors that was going on in this house. And then the media got wind of what this family was going through. So a reporter from a newspaper actually drove out to the house with the intentions of talking to the family. However, the reporter said that when he got to the place and he got out of his car, he really got this awful feeling, and it sort of scared him, and he didn't even want to approach the house. He said that the feeling just got worse, and it got so bad that he ended up getting in his car and just leaving without talking to the family and refusing to go back. So as the community was learning about all of this, Heidi was getting a lot of unwanted attention. Unfortunately, she was being teased and bullied at school. Community members, it was one extreme or another. She was either told that she was, crazy or making stuff up, or you'd have these people reaching out going, "Can you talk to my ancestor or my dad?" And it was just too much attention for her, especially at that young age. Now, Lisa and her sister Joyce, they had began talking, and they remembered their mother, Heidi's grandmother, had always told them that, she could see spirits and hear voices and stuff. And Lisa and Joyce always figured that, their mom was messing with them or just joking around with them. But now they started wondering was she right? Was she really seeing or hearing voices? So again, some years go by and little Jordan is now 3 years old. Lisa stated that she would catch Jordan having a conversation with someone that she couldn't see, just like Heidi did at 3 years old. full-blown one-sided conversations. When Lisa asked Jordan about who she was talking to, Jordan stated that there was another little girl in the house and that was her friend and that she was talking to her. So Lisa ended up asking Heidi, is there a little girl spirit in this house? And Heidi responded, yes, but you don't need to worry, Mom, because she's a good spirit, so it's fine. But, none of this made Lisa comfortable or feel better about the situation and what was going on with now both of her daughters. Now, Lisa and Andrew have kept in touch with this parapsychologist over these years, and after hearing about how now Jordan seemed to be talking to spirits, the same thing as Heidi did, and then hearing how Joyce and Lisa's mother claimed the same thing, the doctor started to believe that maybe the family had some sort of intuition or the ability to see spirits that was kind of passed down through genetics. So the doctor ended up contacting a psychic, a pretty well-known psychic at the time, I think, and asked her to come to the home and, see what they could find out. Now, the psychic wasn't told any history, so she came to the home unknowing anything. They do this so, somebody can't just come in and be like, yeah, I agree, this is what's going on, The family actually left the house, never even talked to the psychic. So the psychic shows up and immediately sensed a young girl spirit. She did sense Mr. Gordy as well, and also stated that there were 3 dark spirits in the house. Now, this was a lot to take in, and Lisa and Andrew wanted to be 100% sure that, their leg wasn't being pulled, right? So they asked for another psychic to come. And again, same deal. The psychic was told nothing, was told to come into the home when the family wasn't there. So the second psychic observed that there were 3 dark spirits in the home as well. She stated that one of the spirits was trying to set up base in Jordan's room, that the second spirit was trying to attach themselves to Heidi, but they were unable to do so because there was a good spirit that was almost like protecting Heidi, and they, of course, assumed that that was Mr. Gordy. The third dark spirit, however, said that it would drift between the living room and Lisa and Andrew's bedroom and just hover above their bed, which would explain Lisa's hearing voices or whispering above her bed at night. So it's a little scary to hear when something like that happens, right? The second psychic also went on to explain that they sensed a portal in the home that seemed to be in the living room, like by the fireplace, that allowed spirits to travel between the spirit world and the real world, and that when, dark spirits or evil spirits or bad spirits come through, they don't want to go back to the spirit world. So they just kind of hang around. So after hearing this, Andrew and Lisa were kind of convinced, okay, we got bad spirits in this house. What can we do about it? So they asked their pastor to come cleanse the house. So the pastor came, did his thing. But however, it didn't work like the family had hoped. One night, soon after the cleansing, Heidi woke up and she said that she felt a bad spirit in her room and it was cold. Apparently, the spirit grabbed Heidi and she started screaming. So, of course, Lisa and Andrew head to Heidi's bedroom to see what she's screaming about, and they state that Heidi was actually hovering above the floor upside down like the spirit was holding Heidi by her leg. Lisa and Andrew were able to, kind of just grab Heidi and take her out of the room, and they ended up staying at a friend's house for the rest of the night. Now, that was the final straw, according to Lisa and Andrew, that now, not only were there scratches, but now she could have got hurt if the spirit dropped her. So the family decided to move and they skedaddled right out of that house. Now, Heidi has done interviews basically pretty much all her life. And even as an adult, she has looked back on her time at that house And she stated that, even after they left the house, she still sees spirits. She still sees them to this day. It's something that it's either a gift or a curse. She's not sure yet. But she stated that she can sense when the spirit is a good spirit or a bad spirit. And if it's a bad spirit, she just kind of gets sick to her stomach. She stated that as for Mr. Gordy, she saw him up until she was about 8 years old, but that's when she started getting bullied in school and stuff. So she kind of started repressing, and she thinks maybe that pushed Gordy away. She stated that she would sit and have conversations with Mr. Gordy and that he would hold her hand and push her on the swings. So it was always a good memory to look back on. She also went on to say that, she had no idea that Mr. Gordy wasn't real. Like, she didn't understand why other people couldn't see him. That to her, he was just as real as her parents or her aunt. Now, Heidi did go on to live a normal life. She got married. She had a couple kids. And she said thanks to the media attention, she was able to actually connect and talk with other people who had similar experiences as her. She has stated, "It means so much to me to help people out there who are going through the same thing as me." Heidi has also gotten skeptics over the years, of course. She stated, you have people who believe you 100%. And then you have some people who just think you're crazy, and there's really nothing in between. Heidi currently has a job in the medical field. Now, the Discovery Channel did do a documentary on this family in 2002, and it's called A Haunting in Georgia. And it's available on YouTube. I will link in the sources where you can watch it. Joyce, Heidi's aunt, also wrote a book entitled The Veil, Heidi Wyrick's story. And there are some other books out there as well. I don't think she's done an interview in recent years. I couldn't really find anything. Unfortunately, her father, Andrew, passed away in 2012. It didn't list a cause, so I'm not sure what happened there. But she seems to now, enjoy her life as unnormal as it can be sometimes. Now, as for myself, I do believe in ghosts and spirits. I've had my own experiences in a certain house I used to live in when I was a kid. My brother and I, we would hear footsteps. There was, an upstairs to this house, and there were wooden stairs, and we would hear footsteps going up the stairs, and nobody would be there. And, we had cats and stuff, but no cats were coming up the stairs or anything, and it was kind of an open staircase, so it's not like somebody could hide. And we got so used to that sometimes if somebody was walking up the stairs, we'd just kind of look and be like, it's not Mom, we're fine. One of the doors that went upstairs, we would close and lock it, and had those big slide locks, those old slide locks. And there were times that if that door was shut and locked, it would unlock itself and open. And, that slide lock was hard because it was all rusty and stuff. So it's not like it easily slid back and forth. So that happened a lot. There were times in the bathroom, like, it was really weird. You'd be like in the mirror or on the toilet, and pennies would just fall from the ceiling. It would just go bloop, and you just look up and we had pennies on the floor all the time, and everybody was just like, why are there pennies on the floor? And nobody believed us. They fell from the ceiling. They did. I'd be in the bathtub and they'd fall in the bathtub. It was just weird. I couldn't really ever explain it. And then there was just standard things where, like, things would move or things would not be where you left it. And, but we weren't scared. And I never felt like the presence was evil or anything. Like, my brother was, we were actually more intrigued than anything that this was going on in the house. And we kind of thought it was cool. Now, when we tell our mom about this stuff, she would kind of just like brush us off and joke about it and play it off like, oh, you guys in your imagination, And so, we just went on. Now, we didn't live there maybe 2-3 years. And then my mom met my stepdad and we moved in with my stepdad. It wasn't until my brother and I were adults and the conversation came up about that house one day. And for the first time, my mom told us, yes, there was something in that house. And we were like, what? And she's like, I didn't want to scare you because you guys were kids. And that's why she played it off like she did, like no big deal, you know. But it was nice to have the validation that it wasn't our imaginations going wild, that we really did experience that. So I do believe in ghosts and spirits. I've never seen one. I've never seen an apparition. I think that would, it myself, I think it would be, but I mean, I'm into that stuff. So, you know, we went on a ghost hunt one time trying to find stuff. So I spent the night at the Villisca Axe Murder House. That was really cool. I mean, I know, morbid curiosity. I just have it. But I would love to hear what you think. Do you believe in ghosts and spirits? Do you believe this happened to this family? I would love to hear what you think in the comments down below. If you'd like to become a feline friend, please just hit that subscribe button and give me a like if you like this content. And if you'd like to become a feline fan, you can hit that join button for special perks. Thank you, everyone, for sitting with me today on our first supernatural story. And I hope to see you next time in the next true crime case or mystery video. Thanks, guys. Bye.